Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. Today on the podcast, we'll be covering an incident debrief for the old Albert Mill, Whitworth, 2009, and this is Lancashire Fire and Rescue Service. Again, with any of these, we're not doing a full reconstruction. It's not a critique of the individuals, and it's not an exercise in hindsight where we point out what woulda, shoulda, coulda. It's a slow walkthrough of a real incident documented in an accident investigation report from May 2009, and this one involves a firefighter injured during breathing apparatus operations at Old Albert Mill in Whitworth. Big element for me in revisiting this incident is not because it's particularly dramatic, it's because elements of this should be familiar to a lot of people. And also I think it's very relevant to some of the conversations that are happening around the UK Fire and Rescue Service at present. This one involves a derelict building, multiple floors and basements, poor visibility, BA teams committed, and an injury that occurred not on entry, but during withdrawal. And those particular details certainly have not aged out of relevance. Let's set the context. Quick one, we're working in collaboration with the Blue Light Show, a national conference and exhibition built around one thing: Blue light services do better together than apart. For learning, sharing, improving how we operate, it brings together fire, police, ambulance, and rescue all in the same place for actual proper conversations about leadership, operations, capability, and the challenges we are facing on the front line. It's about seeing what's possible, pressure testing ideas, and taking practical learning back into your organization. I'm going to be there 1st and 2nd of July 2026 at the event, getting involved with those conversations and connecting with people who really care about doing the job better across the blue light sector. Do not sleep on this. If you value collaboration over silos and you want to make insight into what's actually useful, Blue Light Show is the one to get in your diary. Visit www.bluelight.show. Book your spot. You will walk away with so many insights, fresh connections, and practical takeaways you can actually use day one back in the job. I'll see you there. Old Albert Mill was a large derelict stone mill construction, 5 stories to the rear, 3 to the front, and multiple basements. Cast iron columns had brick arches and timber flooring. It was vacant, been vandalised, and was well known to the fire service. Records showed repeated previous attendances to this property. Attempts had been made to secure the building, and those attempts had not been successful. It was not an unknown risk. It was most definitely a known and dangerous space. So the mill was based on Market Street in Whitworth and had been extensively vandalised since becoming unoccupied approximately 2 years ago. The evening of the 15th of May at approximately 1902, Lima 73 Papa 2 arrived at the front of the mill and secured access by cutting the padlock at the front of the building. 6 minutes later, in 1908, 2 firefighters were committed under BA. This is Firefighter 1 and Firefighter 2. They were committed at the rear access into the second basement on the instructions of the watch manager in charge and tasked with locating and extinguishing the fire. This is entry point 1, and they're under stage 1 BA. Team took with them a hose reel and a thermal imaging camera. The officer in charge, being familiar with the premises and knowing the construction and fire loading, decided that guidelines were not required. Firefighters entered the mill and found the lower basement smoke logged. Using the thermal imaging camera, they located the fire and made their way directly to it. As they approached the fire, they could see what looked like 3 acetylene cylinders, which were in an upright position and fully involved in fire. Quick decision-making by the BA team meant that they left the building and reported it to the incident commander that cylinders were involved. Without any further information at that time, the incident commander took the good decision and instructed that all BA teams evacuate and withdraw from the building. At 9:10, an informative message was sent by the watch manager to their fire control. Derelict mill of 5 floors and basement, measuring 30 figures 30 by 60 figures 60 meters. Offensive tactical mode, 4 BA in use, 2 hose reel jets, and thermal imagery. At the same time, watch manager 2, having proceeded to the front of the building in Lima 73 Papa 2, observed smoke issuing from the first floor of the building and via personal radio asked the incident commander to confirm if he should check the first floor for further seats of fire. When instructed to do so, Watch Manager 2 briefed the BA team to locate the stairs at the rear of the building and check the first floor for fire. A second 2 firefighters committed in a BA team. These were Firefighters 3 and 4, and they were committed via the front access door. They found the stairs to the first floor where smoke could be seen. They went to check for other seats of fire, and this is entry point 2, still under stage 1. Firefighter 3, as the more experienced BA wearer, was nominated as the team leader. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Gore-Tex Professional Fabrics. I have been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together. As the team progressed, visibility improved the further they made it into penetrating the building. Firefighter 4 maintained physical contact with the BA team leader, Firefighter 3, as they moved up the rear staircase. Firefighter 4 fed the hose reel jet up the rear stairs to the first floor, where Firefighter 3 was leading. Visibility on that rear staircase from the BA team 2 was reported as good. Shortly after that, the BA team leader returned back to Firefighter 4, stating that no fires could be seen on the first floor. Watch Manager 2, who was the OIC of Lima 7-3 Papa 2, having received news of the cylinders, then ordered the BA team by radio to withdraw due to the cylinders which had been found in the basement. The team immediately turned to make their exit. Firefighter 4 was at the rear, so he led the way out, keeping the hose reel to his right, whilst the team leader was carrying the branch. At this time, the team members were not in direct contact with each other, and afterwards Firefighter 4 reported that he was feeling a bit panicky. From the statements, Firefighter 4 stated that visibility deteriorated the closer they got to the entry point. Firefighter 4 could see the light from the entrance, so proceeded. As Firefighter 4 moved towards the exit, his left foot then failed to make contact with the floor, which he thought was due to a minor change in levels. It was in fact an open hatch, through which he then fell approximately 4 meters onto a stone brick floor in the first basement. During the fall, his face mask became detached, although he was able to refit it. Subsequent investigations revealed that Firefighter 4 had fallen through an opening from the ground floor into the first basement. The majority of the opening was covered by wooden boards, with boards the same size as the opening in the floor, also found in the first basement. The investigation further revealed that Firefighter 4 failed to adopt correct personal protection procedures as he exited the building following notification of the cylinder hazard. He was not in contact with his team leader and was not utilizing the relevant procedures for the movement in smoke, which involved foot sweeps with the body weight on the rear foot to detect changes in levels or unsafe footing. To exit the building, Firefighter 4 used the hose reel, which had been taken into the building on entry, as a guide back to the entrance point. At this point, Firefighter 3, who was himself exiting the building, was also using the hose reel as a guide. He'd been at the head of the staircase when the instruction to evacuate had been given, but had not been in physical or visual contact with Firefighter 4 since this point. During his exit along the hose reel, he encountered the opening in the floor below and heard groans from the floor below. He attempted to raise the alarm on the radio, but could get no response due to radio traffic. The transmission, however, was heard by the incident commander and the other BA team, who were recommitted for search and rescue purposes. Firefighter 3 went to the entrance door and informed Watch Manager 2 of the situation. Visibility in the first basement was very poor, and Firefighter 4's ADSU went into full alarm mode. At 1922, just 22 minutes after breaking the padlock on the door, a BA emergency message was sent. Watch Manager 2 instructed BA Entry Control Officer Entry Point 2 to don BA and assist Firefighter 3 to find Firefighter 4. Watch Manager 2, not wearing BA, also deployed a triple extension ladder through the open hatch down to Firefighter 4 so that Firefighter 3 and Firefighter 5 could gain access to him. Lima 7-4 Papa 1 redeployed to the front of the building to assist Watch Manager 2. A new BA Entry Control Officer appointed, and a team of 2 BA wearers with a crew manager in charge, entered the building and descended to the first basement via the triple extension ladder. They took a tally down with them to silence the ADSU, and communication with the casualty began. The BA team from Lima 7-3 Papa 1, who were now low on air, took guidance to make it back to their entry point and exited the building. At 1933, an area manager arrives at the incident, and 5 minutes later the ambulance arrives. With Firefighter 4, the injured firefighter, still inside. Another BA team immediately re-entered the mill, taking a longboard with them. Shortly after, the longboard arrived at Firefighter 4, and he was packed up ready for extrication. His BA set was removed, except for the face masks, and he was secured to the longboard. Just before 1946, Firefighter 4 was removed from the premises on the longboard and handed over to the ambulance crew. The area manager sent the message at 20:04, one firefighter rescued and conveyed to hospital by our ambulance. It is beyond a privilege to be able to bring the Firefighters podcast to you, and we are so grateful for every single person that supports, listens, shares, and follows our journey. But here's the honest truth. it takes a colossal amount of time and work to keep the podcast going. And to help us keep doing it, create more, reach more guests internationally, and make the podcast sustainable, we're asking for you to help. And to do this, we've set up a Patreon page. Now, if you've ever wanted to meet a member of the podcast, buy us a beer, buy us a coffee, and you think anything you've ever listened to on the podcast has been worth £3, that's basically what we're asking you for. By joining our Patreon community, you will get access to every single full episode archive we have ever made. Now, hundreds and hundreds of key documents that we've got in there on fire behavior, firefighter health, cancer risks, instant debriefs, and so much more. So if you feel like you want to join the Patreon crew and help us make this possible, head to patreon.com/TFFPC or check the link in any episode podcast notes. From this point onwards, the report moves into a lot of analysis, training and development, recommendations. I want to focus in on what the investigation really found, because it wasn't focused on blame. It focused more on systems. For example, the open floor void was not identified during entry and wasn't particularly concealed. It was reported that correct movement techniques for low visibility environments were not fully applied during the exit, and physical contact with the team had been lost, which is against the procedures in Lancashire at that time. More so, the training and development records show gaps in BA Phase 2 sign-off and assessment records. This is where training culture really becomes central. Because what you just heard isn't really an analysis, it's a sequence. Times, actions, decisions, movements, and ultimately consequences. It's worth pausing not to ask what should have been done differently, but to notice what the report repeatedly tries to bring into view. It's not particularly moments of drama, fall being the exception. What it does show is patterns. One of the strongest signals in this incident is the difference between formal training structures and how skills are actually being applied under pressure. The report shows firefighters who had warm breathing apparatus operationally. It also shows training records that were incomplete, partially signed off, or reliant on limited assessment snapshots. That gap matters, and it probably applies to a lot more of us than we're willing to admit. And that's not because paperwork saves lives, never really does, but because training culture determines what survives when we're under stress. What's reinforced repeatedly tends to surface. The things that we assume are the ones that tend to fade. For example, movement in low visibility environments. The report describes movement techniques that were known, taught, and documented. It also describes how those techniques were not fully applied during withdrawal. And it's not presented as any kind of defiance or recklessness. It's presented as a reality of stress, urgency, and degraded conditions, and of course, the information about the cylinders. In recent years across the UK Fire Service, there's been a lot of significant discussion about the involvement of how firefighters move in low visibility, in heat, and in smoke. Lots of conversations about moving away from older techniques, adapting to modern understandings of fire behavior environments. And that evolution is really important, and if you listen to the podcast, you'll know I'm keen to see that evolve. But this incident quietly reminds us of something else as well. Changes in technique don't remove the need for deliberate reinforced safety behaviors, especially around exits, floor integrity, and perhaps disorientation. No matter what progress we make, it doesn't erase gravity. These voids in floors that will be typical of this type of property are not going to announce themselves. And familiarity with the building, whilst obviously it can make us more effective, doesn't inherently make the buildings safer. The report places a lot of focus on how competence was recorded. It notes that recording only successful assessments creates an incomplete picture of readiness. It's certainly not a criticism of individuals, but it's a signal about the systems that we use. Training culture is shaped not just by what we teach and what is taught, but by what's measured, what's signed off, what's revisited. The reason I wanted to revisit this incident and why I think it's particularly relevant now is it's not asking any listener to judge the firefighters involved, as I wouldn't either. And it's not asking any trainers to defend or discard any current practices. And I'm definitely not advocating for rigid, overly policy-controlled, specific movement techniques that should be applied no matter what. I'm simply holding the mirror up to how training, recording, repetition, and reinforcement can intersect on the fireground. And ultimately, the report's done a lot of the hard work here. I love seeing training continue and evolve. As this episode comes out, I'm probably finishing packing to head out to the International Fire Instructors Workshop in Australia, because we've got to keep learning, we've got to keep evolving. But as training continues to evolve, incidents like this should still serve a specific role, not necessarily just as warnings and not as case studies to scare people straight, but to anchor and remind us that training culture is not about being modern or being traditional. It's about whether behaviors hold when conditions start to degrade. And that balance between evolution and memory is where I think we can hold on to safety and bring it into the relevance of our eagerness to evolve, if that makes sense. Certainly don't want us to freeze training in time. All I want us to think, and all I'm trying to think about when I visit different services or do different things internationally, is that as we modernize BA training, as we evolve movement techniques, as we challenge old habits, we've still got to anchor the learning that we are taking forward in real incidents. Not to scare people, not to blame people, but definitely to remember. Because the incident, the situation, the building, doesn't care how modern our doctrine is. Gravity still works, it does exist, and so do the voids in these buildings. And the risks that were exposed at that incident are not historical. Those voids might be in the very next void or derelict building you go to. Hopefully this incident has reminded you that progress is strongest when it carries memory with it. And that's the lesson I think we should take from the old Albert Mill in Whitworth on the 15th of May, 2009. I'll see you next time. Well, that's it for today, folks. Hope you took a lot away from that episode. We started the Firefighters podcast to develop, inspire, connect, motivate, represent, and most importantly, celebrate the world of incredible emergency services operators and the wider sector through this series of wide-ranging conversations. We really love creating this podcast and bringing it to so many people. Did you know you can also find these on YouTube? We do a lot of video podcasts now. You can head over to our YouTube page and follow, subscribe there. And as a final ask from us, whatever platform you're on, please rate the podcast. It really helps us as a key performance indicator to reach more and more people. I've been your host, Pete Wakefield. This has been the Firefighters podcast. And wherever you are in the world, please stay safe, be happy, live with intention, and where possible, please remember and support your firefighters and first responders. I'll see you next time.